All right. Hello, everybody. It's that time again. Welcome back to Under the Scope. I am your host, Kimberlon B. Excited to be here with you. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is a show to not only talk about me, but also to bring some of the most influential people in the planet and their contribution to mental health awareness. So I'm excited that you're here again. We're going into show number 6. I have some amazing people. Remember, I said in August, we had awesome people on the show, and September is thebomb.com. I got somebody here today. I'm so excited that she's here with us. Um, Connecting with her, I feel like I'm all international right now. Because she's in another country. So I'm excited about that. Just want to say, Under the Scope, this is a place, it's non judgmental. We say what you want to say, how you want to say it, as long as it's not disrespectful. And the information covered here on the scopecast is for conversational, educational, inspirational purposes. And even though there's therapists here, anything we talk about on this show does not substitute for you seeking a higher level of care if you need it. So again, I'm glad that everyone is here, and I'm glad that Hope is here. I'm going to actually let her introduce herself. I'm so excited that she's on here. So Hope, I will let you have the floor. And before we start, if you have any questions, and anybody else that's joining us for the first time, use the chat feature that we have, or you can use the raise hand. If you would like to ask Hope a question at the end or whenever she ask for feedback, put your name in the chat or raise your hand, and then I'll just call you accordingly. Okay. All right, y'all, let's get the train moving.
Hi, everybody. Again, thank you so much for having me. So yes, Kimberlyn is right. My name is Hope, and I am currently living in South Korea. I've been in South Korea going on 2 years now, and I am a social worker, and I work for the military. However, I before moving to South Korea 2 years ago, I worked in Louisiana, and I worked as a social worker, and I worked with children and women of color, and my background is children and women of color who have suffered some sexual trauma. So I worked for the Children's Advocacy Center before coming to South Korea, and now I work with the military. And so I've been here for 2 years. I am hoping to stay a little bit, who knows now with COVID, but I'm hoping to stay for another year or two. And so I am really excited about talking to you guys about my book, How Do We Forgive Our Mothers? It was a book that I published this year. This book is something that I had started. It's a 10-year journey. I started this book, and so this book is about. It's a healing guide for adult women of the adult daughters of women who have strained or toxic relationships with their mothers. So I'm really excited to kind of go into a deeper dive with you guys about this book and the reasons why I decided to write this book. So yeah, let's get started.
Yes, I was so excited. I wanted to show everyone your books. Not only does
Yes.
she have a book, yeah, boom, she has a workbook with it too.
Yes.
And that is so phenomenal. I'm the type, now this is horrible. I buy books, but then when
Mhm.
they're fancy and fabulous and nice and cute and everything else, I don't want to write in them. I don't want to write in them. See, everyone? So I like this book. All right. So without spoiling the book, Hope, can you share some of your story?
Okay, so I'm a survivor of childhood trauma and sexual trauma as a child, and throughout most of my childhood. So this book is a two-parter. This book is about the first part is about my story and all of the things that happened to me and how the relationship between my mother, which is, currently, we have our struggles, right? So I wanted to shed light on how my mom and I got to where we are today and everything that encompasses that. And the second part of that book it's more so of a helping tool for those who share that same story. So I teach other women how to not only overcome the effects of a childhood or a strained relationship with their mother, but how they could thrive, because there's so many effects of that we kind of struggle with when we have a disconnection with our mother growing up, right? It challenges us in psychological ways, social ways, right? It creates negative thinking patterns. And so I wanted to give tools to women who um struggle in relationships throughout their adulthood, struggle with communication, struggle with setting boundaries and advocating for themselves. I wanted to teach women how they could still feel empowered, even though the relationship where, the most important relationship that they have is somewhat strained or doesn't exist. Um, this book, so I really talk about a lot of the negative things that happened between my mother and I. But I also, this book wasn't created to bash her or any other mother, but it does shed light on my experience and my perspective of the things that happened in our lives. Um, but even though I talk a lot about the negative things, I also want to remind people that, there are good things that happen in my life. And my mom didn't get it 100% wrong. I always tell people that there's so many things that my mom got right, but the things that she got wrong were very impactful. And so I still credit who I am today to my mother, whether it is the resiliency I have, the confidence I have, my ability to um, do things for myself, my independence. It comes from my mom. Even though it was some negative things that happened, I have really become a strong person who have become so resourceful, and that's all credited to my mom. So even though there's some things that's happened in my life that I feel like have could you if you read this book, you will be like, hold up, what is going on? Even though there are things like that, I really feel like it truly has made me who I am today. And I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my mother. So I always want to credit not only the negative things that's happened, but the good things that's happened as well. So that's it. Any other
I'm
did I
glad.
miss anything?
No, I like that. And I just wanted to say, when you said about the whoa, reading your book, I promise I was in the prologue for a long time. Right there,
Yeah.
I had to
Mhm.
like put the book down. I was telling my
Mhm.
sister friend on here, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm gonna have
Mhm.
to take this with a grain. And even
Yeah.
how you got your name Hope,
Mhm.
when I read that in the book.
Yeah, that is, you know, I grew up, you know, it's such a weird. I didn't like my name for so long, and because I got bullied, I don't. Okay, so I, today people call it bullying, but I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I just felt like that was a way of life. Like, we talked about people talking about people, so people made fun of my name growing up so much. They used to call me like Hulk Hogan, or they would say like crazy things, but I hated my name. And the story behind my name is a very unique one. And again, it's in the book, but it really does shed the light on how much of a survivor I was, even from the day that I was born. And I talk a lot about my perspective with most of the situations that me and my mom encountered together. I talk a lot about my perspective of that situation or that incident, right? But what's particular about my birth name and my birth story is that it wasn't until I was writing this book that I was able to say, you know what, my birth story isn't just about me, it's also about my mother. And I had to really turn around and figure out, or look at things from her perspective, even my birth story. So it became a birth story not only just about me, but about my mom as well. And so yes, my name Hope came from trauma, right? And so it just really foreshadowed the life that I felt like I was going to going to be destined to live in the first place. So yeah, that's the story about my name. Oh, another thing about this book is that there are some trigger warnings. throughout the book. It is a very heavy book. It's a short read. It's a good read. A lot of people read it in a day. But it is heavy, and I've heard people say, I had to put it down because, I just wasn't expecting that. Um, and I didn't write this book to trigger people. I wrote this book as a part of my own healing process,
Hmm.
right? And so I understand that it took me 10 years to write it. So if it take people like 3 or 4 days to get through it, I'm okay with that. But I want people to not shy away from the experiences that we encounter with our mothers, because as bad as the experiences that I've come across in my own life, there are women who have come across even worse. So I don't want people to shy away from those things.
All right, awesome. So, from counselor to social worker, here's the next question.
Yes.
What's your definition of mental health? I ask everyone that comes on the show.
hmm Okay, so I would describe mental health as it encompasses everything from emotional well-being to your psychological well-being to even your social well-being, right?
Hmm.
Um, Mental health, it really affects how we think, how we do things, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our work, how we feel about the world around us and the people that we come across. um, it really encompasses how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and the choices that we make. And all of that, our mental health can be affected by so many different factors, whether it is um, the family that we're born into, our biological, our biology. Like if our mother had issues or mental health problems, or how they handle stress, it trickles down to us, right? Our life experiences, how we the things that we've encountered throughout our lives, and especially our family history. So our biological, our environments, as well as family history, all affects our mental health. So that's how I see mental health. It encompasses everything, whether it is, emotional, whether it's psychological or social well-being.
All right, awesome. And then, in your opinion, how does forgiveness tie into mental health?
So in my book, the whole point of my book is to help us go through this forgiveness process of healing our mother wounds, right? And so for us, forgiveness may not necessarily mean reconciliation, but it does mean as far as reconciliation with the person. So we may be able to forgive someone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to restore the relationship. However, for me, forgiveness means to reconcile with what has happened. So that means to just acknowledge and come to terms and accept what has happened, and how can you allow that to be a part of your story, but not be your entire story, right? So
Right.
for me, forgiveness and how it plays into mental health is that so many of us we walk around with unforgiveness in our heart. And I understand, because it can be very hard. We think that unforgiveness or forgiveness takes, it can happen in a day, it can happen in like a very short time period, but forgiveness takes time. Because the things that we encounter can be very hurtful, right?
Hmm.
But for me, when we carry unforgiveness, it affects our mental health because it changes how we view the world. It changes our outlook and how we perceive people. And so we start to look at people through a negative lens. And sometimes we project the hurt that we have encountered onto new people in our lives. So that truly does affect like our social connections, right? So
Hmm.
I choose to, as much as I can, I really choose to allow myself and understand like how this process of forgiveness can affect me in the future, right? And I'm not saying it's easy, because I have to deal with it every day, right? In my relationships, my personal relationships, when things hurt me, I have to choose, like, am I going to allow myself to sit in this anger and in this pain and constantly allow myself to hit these roadblocks, or am I going to do something to let this go and move forward with my life, right? So for me, forgiveness plays such a big part in our mental health because, you know, so many things stem from unforgiveness and hurt and pain, so that's how I see it. Do you see things differently? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take this interview and flip it on you, but I get so used to, like, in therapy, I get so used to asking questions, so I'm so sorry.
Yes, that's the therapist. That's not
Right, let me stop.
so what I was going to say, speaking along those lines, because I want everyone to know that's here with us, and I know you said, like you say, from working with children and probably adults too, is that this is more common than people think about this forgiveness towards one mom, and it's something
Hmm.
that is very hard. And do you
Hmm.
see a lot of that in your counseling arena?
Oh, for sure, especially because I work very closely with women, and a lot of times the women that I work with, they struggle with the relationships with their moms. And so what I've seen is that what I talk about in this book is that for adult women, the adult daughters of women or toxic mothers, the burden tends to lie on the adult women to restore the relationships with our mothers. And that becomes very hard for us because, like, we are taught relationships take two people, right? And
Hmm.
every partner in that relationship is required to do the work. But for some reason, in our mother daughter relationships that are toxic or strained, the burden seems to solely lie on the adult daughter to heal that relationship. And we give our mothers, who are also a part of this relationship, the past, or we kind of gloss over the fact that they need to do the work as well. And we in especially in the Black community as women, we hold mothers to such a high regard, and I don't take that away from mothers because mothering is a hard job, right? But at the same time, we tend to allow toxic behaviors and to be overlooked, and that's how the generational curses and the generational traumas happen, because we overlook the things within our relationships with our mothers and think that it's okay, and it's not. So I work with so many women who struggle with the idea that if they stand up for themselves, or if they try to implement boundaries with their mothers, or if they disagree with their mothers, that they are bad daughters. And that's not the case. And so when you internalize this idea of being a bad daughter, um, then obviously that does something to your confidence, your self-esteem, your ability to make choices, right? And so, and then that teaches you how to look at other relationships. So you take that idea of love from how your relationship with your mom is going, and you implement that in other relationships. So now you're thinking, okay, so if my mom can call me a bitch, if she can slap me across my face, if she can degrade me, and I still have to show up in this relationship in a certain way, then that must be how I'm supposed to receive and give love, right? So then you go out into the world and you seek these other relationships, these toxic behaviors, and you accept them as loving when they're not supposed to be.
All right. Awesome. So you working with children. This is another therapist question. Do do you ever find yourself getting triggered yourself when working with certain cases, or have you like healed from it?
No, I haven't. I cannot remember as of lately the last time I've gotten triggered. I do know when I was working, I would say about 7 years ago, I had started out my, fairly new into the field. I started out as a child protection investigator with children and family services, and so that was very triggering for me in the very beginning, because honestly, I grew up in the 80s, so when I first started working, I was just like, I didn't know anything about child protection. Like, wait a second. Like some of the stuff people call child protection for. And I remember growing up, my mom would be like, well, call the people. And I'm like, well, who are the people? And so now I became the people. And it's like, that's what she was talking about. So, I don't know. I just find it funny. And so I remember after the first day of me just like having certain cases, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I should have called child protection on you a long time ago. And she just laughed. And I meant it as a joke, but it was so many things that I had encountered when I was younger or growing up that I was just like that I was now seeing on the other side. And it was very triggering because it's just like as an adult, like how are like at what point do you feel like it's okay to treat just not kids that way but other people that way in hurtful or harmful ways. So as of recently though, I can't recall any triggering moments, but I can relate to my clients, and I always try to let them know like I understand their process. I understand what they're going through, and I always try to find ways to relate to my clients because um I've been there. And there's this level of disclosure you're supposed to have as a therapist or not have as a therapist, however you want to look at it. But when some of my clients come across my book, it's like they're like, you know what, now I know that you understand exactly what I mean. So, yeah, I don't think it's been per se triggering, but it just opens up the door for me for like the compassion so much more.
Okay, that's yeah. I to be transparent, that's why I was like, I gotta get her on, and I'm glad that she said yes because that was a hard thing for me as well to
Mhm.
forgive my mom. We didn't have the best relationship either, and it took me getting into my 40s to
Mhm.
where I was okay. Be
Mhm.
and I know we didn't talk about this, but even going along those lines, I held like resentment towards my mom for years
Oh,
because of the
absolutely.
relationship we have. And this is pre-counselor, so I don't know what she went through and brought into our relationship. None of that. And
Mhm.
I stayed angry with her for the longest time.
Mhm.
And it took me in the counseling room, sitting across from others, to actually get to that point of forgiveness with my mom.
Mhm. When you talk about resentment, oh, that is something that I definitely can relate to. And it's so weird to think about because I feel like my personal journey, I don't know if it had anything to do with me being a therapist myself. I just feel like I compartmentalized so much of my life. Like in this area of my life, I was great, I was thriving, right? But then in this area, I was falling apart. And at some point, every like the areas that were falling apart, it trickled into other areas of my life, and things
Hmm.
just felt like I just felt like I was not gonna survive this. And so I had to make a conscious decision to figure out how can I live my life because I knew I didn't want to live my life like this, right? And like I said, that's why my book took 10 years to write
Hmm.
because in the beginning of this thing, my book, it was very angry. It was very like, you could see how resentment showed up in the things that I wrote. But I would put the book down for months at a time. I would, put my notes aside. I would just stop writing completely for a year or something like that. And so I would always come back to it. I would read through the stories, and those stories again would trigger me. But then I would have a new perspective, right? And it wasn't until I want to say maybe 2 years ago, right before I moved to Korea, I had really just put this thing on the shelf. I wasn't trying to go back to it, but every day I thought about it, and that's how I knew I needed. God was still telling me, "Hope, you have a story that you need to put out," but I was just not ready to kind of open that up again, you know. But like I talked to you earlier off camera, I also was doing a podcast 2 years ago, and I had done a podcast called How Do We Forgive Our Mothers with other therapists, right? And other women who also struggle with their relationships. And it wasn't until that moment where the conversation had ended, I was walking out the door, and one of the other ladies was like, Hope, this is where you need to be. This is who you need to be speaking to, these women. Even in that moment, I was just like, okay, whatever. I'm working with kids. That's what I love to do. I'm not doing anything else. And so one of my mentors had written the book, and she invited me to be a part of her book and to write a small part about my story. And I was just like, nobody wants to hear about what I have to say. Like, nobody wants to hear about my story. And yes, I've struggled and I have wanted to give up, but I kept going. But who cares? Everybody has some story like that, right? And it wasn't until I finished that little 5-page essay for her to go into her book that I realized, oh no, the Hope, there's a lot more here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my healing journey started. And the book, for myself, I still kept it on the shelf because I was still so resentful. I could not talk about to my mom the things that had bothered me. And again, that's part of the book. Like, we have these expectations that we're going to have this big old book, this kind of Jesus moment where we sit down and we get to tell our moms everything she's done to hurt us, and she's going to accept it, and we're going to hug it out and move on. We romanticize this idea that that's going to happen, and the reality is it's not likely that that's going to happen, because our mothers, who obviously are older than us, they have a certain belief system, right? And because, like we talked about earlier, because being a mom is such an incredibly hard job, um what mothers think in that moment is that they're doing the best that they can. And so there's a level of defensiveness that comes up when you try to say, no, but this was not the best way to handle this. And so most adults or most mothers are going to become defensive. And so there's really not a lot of ways to, unless your mom is like super mature and ready to have those conversations, it's not likely that they're going to receive it in such a way that they're going to say, okay, you know what, I accept that and I'm sorry, and how can I make this better? It's not a lot of ways. It's very rare that you have those come to Jesus moments.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, it really teaches us, like, how do you reconcile with the fact that you may not have these big monumental sit downs with your mother and walk away from it feeling like you've gotten everything off your chest? Like, how do you reconcile with that? And how do you still, even if you choose to have a relationship with your mom who don't fully acknowledge the pain that she's inflicted, how do you grapple with it, right? Because some women still want relationships with their mothers even though they won't fully acknowledge the hurt and the pain that they've caused. And I just said all that to say, like, I had to go through that process myself, and that's where my resentment kept showing up, because it was like, you see all of this hurt, you see the things, like, do you not understand? Like, even as an adult, like, do you not remember what you just said last week? Like, and so I was resentful because I felt like I was getting nowhere, right? But it wasn't until it was like, my mom is who she is, and when she showed me who she is, then I have to just accept that, because I was pushing onto her this idea of a mother that I wanted to have, and like, it wasn't happening. And so that's where my resentment came from, because she was failing to live up to the standard that I had envisioned in my head. And I wasn't seeing her as a true human being. Like, okay, she is a human being, that's a person that's gonna make mistakes, and she is not who I envision her to be. I am envisioning her to be like this almost Christ, this Jesus person in human form, and no one is perfect. No one is Jesus. And we like, we put our parents on these very high, like, we very high,
Pedestals.
standards,
Yeah.
these pedestals, right? And when they don't rise up to that pedestal that we put them on, then it's a blow to us. And so that's where the resentment comes from. So I really had to check, like, why do I have her on such a high pedestal? she is human. And so I have to live with it. And so that's when I started to heal from the resentment and not be so angry in every instance where, if she was manipulative or ungrateful or angry, when she started to act out in those ways, it's like, okay, but that's who my mom is. And so I can't expect her to be anything else but who she is. I know that was a long about answer, but I hope I gave you the answer that you were looking
That
for.
was perfect. And I was glad that you touched on that, like debunking all of this stigma, around resenting moms. Not saying I want everybody to leave from here and resent their moms, but I remember when I would have this resentment. And for example, if I went to church or if I talked to certain people and I would be like, they would say something about mom. Did you call your mom? And I'm like, nah, because, that's where I was at that time. But they're like, well, you shouldn't be that way. You only get one mom. You shouldn't treat your mom like that. You should respect your mom. But then it just made me more and more angry. So I'm glad that you even touched on that we can have that resentment. And I really like how you said the acceptance piece, that that's how they are. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not saying that they're right or wrong. They cuss me out, they slap me, whatever. No, that's how they are. We don't know what attributed to them becoming that type of parent. What was going on when they became that type of parent at that time? Is that the way they was raised? And another thing you said, I like what you said about the generational curses. Let's break that. So if we knew mom would do this and that's how grandma treated her, then let's do it differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so.
It wasn't, it didn't, the resentment for me didn't really, I didn't process my resentment until I understood that when, like I said, when I started to write this book and I started to see the birth, my birth story as our birth story. And I had to look at it very differently. Like, okay, my mom was, I had to envision, okay, so my mom was about what, 24 years old when she had me, right? And so what is it like to be a 24-year-old mother growing up in the 80s, right? And my mom was a teenage mom. She had my older brother when she was 17. So what is it like to be not only a 24-year-old mom, but a mom who was, in the 70s, a teenage mother? And I had to really sit with it, like, okay, in the 70s, my mom was one of 5 or 6 siblings, and my grandmother she was one of those stern people. My grandmother and my mom are two completely different people, right? My mom, I had to think about every story that my mom had told me or the stories that I knew about our family when it came to, there's so many secrets within our family. So I had to think about what it was like for my mom growing up in that environment where there are all these secrets, right? Um, and I had to realize, my mom felt like an outcast herself. She told me about the stories of her own abuse growing up when she had my older brother, and how she had to leave the house, right? So, and she was one of the oldest of all of her siblings. And so, even in that sense, where growing up, she had to become a mother figure
Mm-hmm.
to her younger siblings before she had her own child. And then being out on her own at such a very young age, and then having another child when I come about, and I was a medically delicate child. I was born 2 months early, and just trying to think about all of the things that she encountered, not just within her family, but what was going on in the world around her. And to know that there may have been some developmental milestones that she may have missed because she was, you know, taking care of her younger siblings. She was trying to um, maneuver through her own traumas throughout her history or throughout her family, having her own identity issues, right? And so I've really learned to realize how all of those things contributed to who she became as a parent. And so when I grew up, and it's so different for me because as a millennial, I have a completely different vocabulary when it comes to mental health and talking about my feelings than my mom. My mom was taught to not talk about things. And so what do you do when there are two completely different worlds clashing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about things. My mom is like, no, that's not what I was taught. So when we're starting to clash, it's like, no, you're not getting it. And she's like, no, I don't have to, because this is how I was raised, right? So it is it's a collision of generations. And when you accept that my mom don't even have the vocabulary to discuss her trauma, because that's not the world she grew up in, but I do, right? So you start to have a little bit of compassion, because you're like, okay, they how do you fault somebody for just not knowing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel like I had to really, that's where I saw, okay, you can't resent someone for just not understanding and not knowing better, you know? If they knew better, like you said, we talk about all the time, we know better, we do better. But if they don't know, if they don't have the tools, if those tools didn't exist, then how can we fault them for trying to do things differently at that time?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So, right now, before we open up the floor and let you go under the scope, everyone start putting names in chat. I actually have a question to ask you from chat. But before
Okay.
we get there, what products or resources would you like to promote?
Okay, so again, my book is How Do We Forget About Our Mothers? It is on my website, and you can go to my website. It's www.justmorehope.com. And so you can get a copy of the book and the workbook. Um, Other things that I have, other resources. So I am starting a 10-week intensive program for the adult women of toxic or strained relationships with their mothers. So everything I talk about in the book, I teach you how to implement that and apply that in your real life in this 10-week intensive program. You can learn a little bit more about that program and sign up if you choose to in that on my website as well at justmorehope.com.
All right, awesome. Any Facebooks or Instagrams or just
Oh,
the
yes.
website?
My social media is the same across all platforms. So if you just go to Instagram, you can follow me at Just More Hope. My Facebook is, type in Just More Hope, I'll pop up. And Twitter, Just More Hope. Every social media platform, I'm pretty much out there at Just More Hope.
All right, awesome. I'll ask you question number one and then I'll open the floor. Let
Okay.
me read it. This is from someone that's attending. Um, so it says, I went through a lot of abuse with my mom excuse me. I went through a lot of abuse with my mom, but before she passed last year, I forgave her. But I still deal with her death hard. So, what about that when you get to that place of forgiveness and your mom has passed away?
Oh, that is a tough one. My mom, obviously, she's still alive. But I also had a moment where I I almost felt that way as well, because my mom, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. I want to say in 2012, I believe. And so for me, I had just lost my grandmother to stomach cancer. And so for me, again, this is where I was really struggling with the relationship with my mom. Um, and I lived in two separate states. We lived in two different states. And so we still had a very, very strained relationship. And I used to pray to God. I would never forget. I would pray to God all the time. Lord, just heal our relationship. Whatever you could do to kind of help us move past whatever hurt, like, can we do that? And I remember so vividly, I used to pray to God to heal the relationship. And then my mom got cancer. And it was like, God, I asked you to heal our relationship, not to give her cancer and then hopefully, or not hopefully, but then something happens to her, because that isn't healing our relationship. And I became so angry because I felt like God was doing things that I wasn't asking him to do. And I'm like, I've asked you to heal the relationship, not to give her cancer. And so I was afraid as well that, okay, if she was to die like my grandmother died, then how am I going to get past this hurt? It wasn't okay, well, I need to forgive her now thing, because I think I even tried to do that. Like, I would go home and like, okay, let me just forget all of these things. But then, because it's like my mom is dealing with cancer, right? But I would go home, and the same mom that was there 3 years ago, who would say mean things or do whatever it was, she was still there. And I was like, wait, okay, you know what? She's still who she is, even though she's still going through some medical things, right? But what I want to say is that it's hard. It can definitely be hard when you lose your mother, right? And I think we grieve the what ifs. What if we could have had a certain relationship? What if we could have become closer? We grieve those things. And so I think another part of that grieving process is radical acceptance that, what the relationship you had is what it was. And if you chose to forgive your mother before she passed away, you can live with the fact that how can you honor the relationship you had at that moment, because yes, she may not no longer be with you in the physical, but she is always around you, and she lives within you. The things that she's taught you, good or bad, she's taught you something. So to be able to just show up in that way, that for me is how you can move throughout the grief. Is it going to be easy? No, because grieving for everyone is different, right? So you may not be able to just feel like, I lost my brother when I was 17, and so there's nothing about grief that says that you are completely going to get over the losing of someone that you love. And you just learn how to live with, their absence. You learn how to just carry them with you, right? And still honor them in ways. And so I found ways to honor my brother, because when my brother passed away, he was in his young adult years and I was still in my teenage years. And like I talk about in the book, even our relationship wasn't the best, right? And so sometimes I think about, as an adult, how our relationship would have been different. I would have grown up. I would have not been this immature 17-year-old, and he would have gone through his life. And so sometimes I do grieve the fact that what we could have had today is impossible. But just to be able to honor who my brother was, and just still kind of carry him throughout my life, is the way that I have been able to cope with losing my brother. So I would think that you could do the same, or you can apply the same techniques to losing your mom and still trying to honor her in that way.
Thanks for answering that. She said it was hard because she was the one that was there for her mom the
Hmm.
most. And of course, the other siblings weren't there. And she was the one that got the brunt of it. But she said she did move into that place of forgiveness. And I think once we move into that place of forgiveness, that's where the healing starts to begin. And
Yeah,
I was glad that you said, about the healing process and about forgiving, because that is true. It is a healing process.
absolutely.
All right. Anyone have a question? Okay, Choice. I,
More like maybe a statement.
Okay.
okay.
Um, I always felt like I didn't have the best relationship, but my mother's always been there. The
Hmm.
good, the bad, the ugly. She has always been there. And I know that I was a lot closer to my grandmother, but I'm still close to my mom. But we always didn't see things eye to eye on everything. I always felt like maybe I'm being treated a little bit different because of the secrets, but
Hmm.
not to her, because I am a result of a secret.
Hmm.
I always say that I'm the best kept secret. And then over time, I had to learn about how things were then versus what they are today. Because like my dad, I didn't meet him till like I was maybe 14, 15, 16 years old.
Hmm.
And so, and then when you're going to ask questions, you start hearing stuff from other people. That was the problem. You start hearing stuff from other people. And then when I approached my mother with it, then she didn't tell me the truth, but then it found out it was the truth. So that hurted me drastically a lot. But at the same time, I went through a whole lot of stuff. I ain't saying that I was 100% perfect, because I know I was not. But at the same time, it just growth. But me and my sisters, I don't care. We can fuss, fight, but we're like this. We're going to come to the battle for each other, because that's what siblings do. But I have the opportunity to know my dad's side. And then it's like, and then my grandparents, and I'm like, what's going on? Nobody told me. Everybody knew this. Even my cousins knew this, but I didn't know nothing. Me and my sisters didn't know. I mean, nothing. And so it came to a point where I said, I don't know. That was the past. Let's move forward with it. I can't change it. I would never really know the whole truth as to why. So it took a lot of growing within myself and forgiving myself, and to forgive others, and just to keep moving forward, because I had to. That was my truth, my story. I don't know. I may never know, but I have to move forward with it. And so I have. And I got a relation, like I said, with my dad, my other siblings on my dad's side of the family, and my mom. She has 4 girls. There's 4 of us, and so but I got past it. And yeah, do we? Me and my mama still clash. We clash a lot.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
But not. I don't know if it's because we don't communicate well. But then one of my sisters, this one that's on the phone, she was like, "Choice, da 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 da."
Yeah.
And it's not that. It's like I be trying to explain it, and then I don't know if it just get twisted and all turned around or whatever. But yeah, but I know there is nothing in this world that she will not do for me. That part I do know, and the same goes for her. It's the same way. But but I just want to say that. Oh, and another thing, I read it to Kim the other day, because it's about another topic. And I wrote about forgiveness. I said, yes, I can forgive, but it has not. This is not about my mom, though. It says, yes, I can forgive. I have forgiven, but it doesn't mean that the pain and the hurt went away. And it's the truth. It doesn't mean that it actually just goes away. It's a place. I learned to. Please turn that down. Please.
I didn't even turn it on.
No, I'm asking you to turn it down. And so, and I said the hurt is still there, even though I've forgiven. Is that just a normal thing? Even though you can forgive someone, and that it's still there.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you can forgive them, because you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for the other person. And then also I say I can forgive, but it's like as soon as you see that individual, it's like it all comes back. So how do you deal with that part?
Yeah. Kim, did you want to say anything before I kind of jump in?
I'll jump in, and then I'll let. So I liked what you said about it's normal, and I think that's having to normalize it. It's okay to feel a certain kind of way and to feel these emotions, especially if you haven't had like the best relationship experience with, especially our moms, if it's friends or something like that. Sometimes it's levels to this thing. Sometimes certain people, we can just cut them out.
Yep. Right.
But because of the upbringing and culture and whatever else goes into it, when it comes to our mom, that it hits different, right? Absolutely. Because if you say I have this resentment, or you say I have these type of emotions, the first thing people will say, oh, you being disrespectful. But it's like, I feel this way, but it's okay to feel that way, to normalize it. What are you going to say, Hope?
I was definitely going to say that something similar. Like we oftentimes are not allowed to express how we feel, right? And I think when it comes to forgiveness in any type of relationship, we have to hold space for how we feel. Like, we cannot ignore that we're hurt. We can't ignore that we're angry. We can't ignore that we are disappointed or we feel betrayed, because sometimes we feel like we shouldn't express these feelings. And sometimes we feel like we shouldn't even have these feelings at all if we have this, if we want to forgive. But we have to allow space for those emotions to show up and us to kind of sit in those emotions. The more we try to suppress feeling the sense of betrayal, disappointment, or anger, which are all a part of who we are as human beings. So we have that right to feel those emotions. It's okay to feel those things. Now, what I will say when it comes to this healing journey, um, I've always felt like, you are healed from something when things don't trigger you as much. That's how you know you pretty much done the work. But if you're still in a relationship, any type of relationship, where something continues to show up and it triggers you, then you know there's still work to be done. So you can say you have forgiven, and you probably feel like you have, but if something continues to come up for you and it's still triggering some negative things within you, then that means there's still some work to be done. And so you can always remember, you know, the thing that caused the hurt, but if it's still creating some pain within you, then it's worth it to revisit and figure out, okay, what is this emotion? Why is this still coming up for me? What is this pain I'm still dealing with? But that all comes with being able to sit with and allow yourself to feel what you feel, and not try to minimize how you're feeling or gloss over how you're feeling. If you're angry, if you're hurt, if you're sad, if you are 100 other emotions, if you feel that way, then it's okay to feel that way. But it's also okay to question, okay, where is this coming from? You know? And if it's still coming from a relationship that you're still trying to mend or be a part of, then it's worth it to acknowledge that and question it and see what else needs to be done within that relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean you haven't forgiven. I mean, because sometimes we forgive people in relationships so for the sake of the relationship to stay together, but there's still some internal work that needs to be done. So that's what I wanted to say.
That was good.
I know. Really good. I like that. And
Yeah. Thank you.
and not
Oh,
only
you're
because
welcome.
I'm a therapist or a counselor, but really therapy that can really be an ideal place to process, because that will give you that
Hmm.
neutral place to say what you need to say and how you want to say it. Because of course we could
Yeah.
go to what family, you're going to tell family this is how I'm feeling, and not to
Yeah.
discount church, but you can't, sometimes in church you can't even speak like that either. So
Right. Right.
will give you that neutral place to process those true emotions. And you can just go ahead and pour out whatever you need to pour out in a therapy setting.
Absolutely. And you talked about it earlier when you say when you live in your truth, no one should shame you for saying, this hurt me. It's okay. Like, it's okay to acknowledge certain things have hurt you or whatever. It's okay for us to say, "Oh, this made me feel good." So it's okay for you to say, "This made me feel bad," or "This thing hurt me in a way." And so when you talk about being able to fully acknowledge your own experience and live within your truth, but then being hit with, "Oh, well, that's still your mom," or it's being looked at as disrespectful. It's not disrespectful to acknowledge your experience. You always have to live your truth, and your truth in your life may not be someone else's truth, right? And that's okay to acknowledge that what I experience is different than what you experience, but it doesn't negate the fact that it has caused me some type of pain. And that doesn't mean it's disrespectful. It's me being allowed to acknowledge the pain that it has caused. And you said it so right. So in certain settings, we are not allowed to acknowledge those pains and those hurts. So, we're sitting with family. We may not be able to say X, Y, and Z really hurt me without feeling guilty, without feeling shame, right? You may not be able to go to church and say, my mom hurt me or my husband hurt me in such a way where you are not met with, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Like, no, that's not what you need. You don't need to be met with, you shouldn't feel this way. You should be met with, it's okay to feel how you feel. Tell me a little bit more about your experience. That's radical acceptance, right?
Mhm.
But we have been taught, especially in the Black community, how to live with shame. Choice talked about it earlier. Um, the secrets come from shame, right? People keep secrets because they don't want to feel the shame, not only the internal shame, but they don't want to feel the shame that other people inflict, that they impose upon us, right? The idea of shame comes from believing that you are not worthy of love and acceptance, right? And so sometimes the people that are closest to us create the biggest shame experiences in our lives. There could be family members, right? There could be parents. Though they create the biggest shame experiences because you are met with, you feel like you're not loved for a mistake, or you become, instead of focusing on the behavior, you become that thing that is symbolic to whatever they have been triggered with, right? Or
Mhm.
symbolic of whatever trauma that they haven't yet hit to heal from. So you carry around this emblem of shame, and where you don't feel love for who you are. You don't feel love for acknowledging how you feel, right? And so we learn to hide parts of ourselves, not because we are trying to protect other people, but because most times it's out of shame. And so when we talk about family secrets, trust me, I feel like every person I have met has some type of story where, there's some identity issues because you don't, just all types of stuff, right? So a lot of times those secrets are kept because of shame, not because they're really trying to protect anybody, but the shame that comes with acknowledging the truth of it all. So I just wanted to point that out too when Choice was talking about it earlier.
I like that.
That's what I used to say. I started saying, "Oh, my uncles now, they were just protecting me." I had to make because you just said it, and they made me realize. I was like, "Oh, they were just protecting me because I don't know the truth. I don't
Right.
know." So for me, I just said my uncles were protecting me
Mm-hmm.
because I have my mom has 10 of them,
Oh,
and
wow.
well, now we're 8 now, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying it was a lot of protect. We had a lot of protections. I call the secrets are a lot of protection. So I gave it a new thing. I called it protection. I guess just from my own self. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Awesome. We have any more questions, comments? Thanks, Joyce.
You're
Questions,
welcome.
comments? Anyone else?
I'll share with you in reference to um, the talk. Has been very informative, very good. Um, what I what I have experienced being married into a family, and my husband, he was a twin, and like we say, that secrets are generational. I think with the Black culture, that just went down with grandmama them and
Mm-hmm.
mama them, where they kept so many secrets about other women. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
don't deal with it nowadays. We don't put up with it. They accepted it. It was okay.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, we kind of deal with my husband, where he did not find out that the father that gave him his last name or father him, he didn't know that
Mm-hmm.
that was not his father until he was 21 years old. It was a kept secret, and it came out in a family gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And so just me speaking on behalf of him, that can be very painful. And not only identity crisis, because
Mm-hmm.
now, even though it's out, when it comes to the shame, the mother, it's more so on the mother because she was in between two relationships. So the healing is where you release your mother, the choice is you forgave her. So that's where you free. That was a
Mhm.
release. You might not know that how free you are when you released her for
Mhm.
forgiving her. But right now, even now in our family, they don't want him seeing his father still alive. They don't want him to have no parts of his father. I said, but that's your dad.
Mhm.
You know, it's secret, and that's hurtful because you're stuck in between identity, you know, and the mother trying to save face because she don't want the family to know that she had this situation. So
Mhm.
he's called a name that really ain't his real name. So it's just like, you know, a lot of this going on in our communities where we're you can't be who you are, and it's not right. And
Mhm.
so when it comes to emotional, and when it comes to even death or whatever, you know, I lost my mom, so I understand the pain and where you're missing your mother. That's just natural, you know. But you did your job, you know, in relief forgiving. But that pain is still going to be there, and that long, it's a process. And as time go on, it'll get better. It'll get better for you, you know, in whatever the situation may have been, you know. So that's why I really enjoyed this talk, this session. You know, my husband, he works, so I wish he would have been able to hear a little of it. But this is very good. You know, a lot more people need to talk about it because talking is healing. If
Mhm.
you're able to
Absolutely.
put it on the table with a group, it's healing. It's really healing to the spirit, to the mind, and to the body. And it
Oh,
allows you to move
absolutely.
forward, you know, because when you hold that stuff in, that's when sickness come in, you know, your pain, and then you, in your mind, you're saying, you know, God, I'm still feeling this way. But that's a part of even missing her and longing her and loving her, you know, just one more day with her. But you did your part. It's gonna be
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
I just want to say, well, you know, I have my dad's last name, Perkins. I have his last name.
No, I'm
So when
saying
they got married, when I
my
no,
half.
no. That's what I'm telling you. When I was
Yeah,
2 years old, my parents got married, and I
good.
took my dad's last name. I do not call him my stepfather. He is my dad. He raised me. You know, I am his child, even though I
Mhm.
have a biological father that was not a part of my life until later on in my life. I don't discredit anything
Right.
because when I was sick, he nurtured me back to health. When you
That's
have those
good.
female issues and you needed items, he went to the store and got them and brought them home so that
That's
I could
good.
have those things. So you never take that. It's just I
Mm-hmm.
had to, and so that's why I'm just letting you know. It's a name. It doesn't identify. It doesn't take away your
Mm-mm.
identity or
It
anything.
doesn't.
Especially if you have a good life. It hurts worse if the life was really, really bad. And I'm just going to be honest on that part. But I missed out on nothing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I have that name up until I got married. It only changed when I got married because that's the only reason why it changed.
Mm.
But I've had that name, and it's on the last name is on my birth certificate. So that's why it had been so much deeper that I did not know
Right.
for his name to be on my birth certificate.
Okay.
So I carry my dad's name still.
Mhm.
So I got my dad, and then I got Junior or JR, whatever I decide to call my biological father. I have a great relationship with both. And when I
Good.
got married, I would have had them both walk me down the aisle. I won't treat them no different. I treat them as if they've been a part of my life all my life. So
That's what both
yeah,
of us.
Yeah.
yes. So those are some words of encouragement.
Yes, you're welcome.
And
I
uh
can I say something really quick, Miss Kathy? So I think, yeah, you talked about your husband finding out things about his life when what at 21 at a family gathering. I think that is so common when the truth reveals itself.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not to say that you know they may have had their reasons. I talk a lot about shame, but Ms. Choice mentioned earlier, like there can be a level of protection. I do
Mhm.
still think sometimes it doesn't mean that acknowledgement of the truth, I think, is still important. Whether or not, this person that they tried to keep away was a dangerous person, whatever it may be, it's okay to even just acknowledge that and say, this person was not good for you, or whatever, X, Y, and Z. And so that's why we kept this person here and away from you, because I felt like this person wasn't safe. And that's okay to acknowledge, but I think just completely like ignoring the fact that there is a part of who you are, and that part of who you are doesn't exist, that does create some identity issues. Even if you have lived a good life, um some people, you see it all the time, where adopted children, they go and they want to research who their biological parents are, because part of them, even if they have had great relationships with their parents, a part of them is missing. And we talk a lot about mental health, where part of mental health absolutely has something to do with biological genetics being passed down. And so, in order for you to understand and get a clear picture of
Mhm.
who you are as a whole, sometimes it's important to understand where we come from. We hear it when we go to the doctor, like, what is your family history? And sometimes you don't know, right? I felt that way, and I don't know who my biological dad is. I've heard stories. I've tried to have that conversation with my mom, but I've also recognized when I addressed it with my mother, um, there is a lot of shame around it, and so she shuts down. And I know that's something that we can't have the conversation about. But it's still, who I am as a person. I still question, like, okay, what parts of me am I missing? Because all I see is just one part of the pie, right? But there's a whole
Mhm.
other part that I don't know. And so for me, I
Absolutely.
still have to reconcile with the fact that, how am I going to live a great life not knowing part of the pie, not
Yeah,
being able to identify part of this pie of my life?
absolutely. That was my concern as well, because it wasn't anything about his father that was abusive. It was just the mother didn't want family members and people to know that she had.
Outside relationship. And
Yeah,
again, that's where the shame comes from. And that's gonna be her own work to be able to say, this is what happened. This is what happened, and it happens, right?
right.
She is not the first, and she is not the last to have children out of other relationships. But I think a part of her, is still struggling. So that's why the acknowledgement of the truth is really going to be hard for her, because um, it's hard to reconcile with it. And just
Mhm.
like I talked about my mom and her mom having very different vocabularies when it comes to mental health and emotional health, maybe that's how she processes things. A lot of people, older generations, may not be willing to go through that process, because that's not something that's new to them. They never had to, like, they have literally learned how to compartmentalize and keep it on the shelf. And so for her, that may just be her process. For him, it may be, no, let's talk about this. And again, that's where the generational clashes start to come, you know.
I just see differences when it's like that. That
Hmm.
he's treated like the black sheep of the family, and then because her husband, which is his stepfather, um, they had children, and she had the twins, which is his sister,
Hmm.
but she went missing years ago. But the sister's the one that found the father. She went
Hmm.
looking for him before she went missing. And so it's just like, fear. Like he don't want to question or talk to her about it too much. He actually know where he lives. He go visit him from time to time. But
Hmm.
it's like you have to sneak and do it. Don't tell the family or tell the mom that you're going to visit him, or they'll go off. What you going to see him for? I
Yeah.
mean, I think that right there, when it comes to a relationship with a child and a parent, stay out of it. If they want a relationship, you allow that relationship and just move on, because they're adults right now. But to
Hmm.
keep children, or saying anything negative is not healthy,
No.
because of what you done. You didn't done wrong. Now he's grown. And it's life. You got to move on. And that's what's going on with our black men now. They dealing with so much pressures on every side. And men need their fathers. They're real fathers, not the ones, those are good too. You raised them well. But yeah, he need his own blood. He need to know, but dad, what kind of ailments you got? What's running our family? If I go to the doctor, those are things that need to be.
Yeah, yeah.
I push him, I encourage. I said, you could go see him. We can talk today, because
Well, he is
that's
he is
something.
lucky to have you to be there to
Oh,
be his
yes.
support for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Miss Eva, were you gonna say something?
Hi, yeah, first, Hope, thank you.
Hi,
And
Miss Eva.
hi. I just want to chime in real quick. Thank you for your broadcast. But as far as me, I was raised single mom, actually adopted at birth. And I think with everybody, for the most part, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think we all just try our best as parents. Of
Mm.
course, I've had issues with my adoptive mom. I actually ran away at 15 because I didn't know I was adopted till I was 15. But when I found out, I left the home. But I'm saying all this, oops, sorry, to say, can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I don't know what I pressed. But anyway, I'm saying all this to say this. I know that some of you have brought up how important it is to find your biological. And if you are serious about it, I actually found out who my biological father is because my oldest adult daughter took a 23andMe or Ancestry.com test, and she matched up with my biological half sister.
Mm.
So that's how I found out who my bio dad is. So if you're really interested, I would suggest you go that route, just get tested, and you might pop up in someone's inbox.
Mm-hmm.
Because she tested as their niece. So they reached out to her and tried to find out how she came up so strong as their niece on the blood or the ancestry.com test. But anyway, again, I never seeked my bio. It just wasn't, I didn't feel the need. I believe blood doesn't make you family. I never, um, my bio mom's family reached out to me because she died, and her last wish was that I be notified of her death. So they sought me out, they found me and notified me of her death, and I paid for the spray of 2 dozen pink roses for her casket, and I basically had the banner say thank you for my life, because clearly she could have opted to abort. But they had to respect the fact that I was raised by my mom, and when I reference my mom, I mean my adoptive mom.
Mm-hmm.
She wiped my nose, took me to my doctor, made sure I went to school every day, and that I am who I am today. So I never felt the need, but I do know that some people feel that that is something they need to do. And I do go to the doctor and I tell them I'm adopted and I don't know anything about my health issues or histories, and I'm okay with that. So I don't know. I just feel like there's a different perspective, and I just don't, for me personally, feel the need to know. But I know that more people do than not. That's all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone
Yeah.
else? Any other questions, comments?
Real quick, Hope, are you looking to write a second book? Has the Lord put that in your heart? If so, what it will be? And will it
Oh,
take another 10 years? What are we doing?
absolutely not. It is not taking another 2 years. But before I wrapped up this book, I spoke to my editor and I was like, look, I got 2 more books in my spirit. It's another How Do We Forgive series. It's not going to be How Do We Forgive Our Mothers, but it's going to be a How Do We Forgive, XYZ. I don't want to put it out there because I feel like it's so good. I'm in the process now. I'm still basking in this book. I'm so proud of this book because this
Mm-hmm.
book was birthed in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of just my own personal journey, and I'm just so happy that it is here, and it just really solidifies like my entire journey. Like it has taken a solid 10 years now because it was just I tried so many times to finish this book, and one of my best friends, she always reminded me that, you didn't finish this book because it wasn't ready. It wasn't ready to be finished. Like, you still had so much that had you tried to finish this book 5 years ago, there would have been so much missing from this book,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so happy that it took what it took, because I didn't have all the tools that I needed today 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, right? So, but to answer your question, yes, I am working on two more books. I'll give you one. So I have lived a very interesting life, I say, and I am single, and I have lived a very single, interesting dating life. So, my next book is going to be about relationships, and how do we forgive our exes. And it's going to be like a dating stories. Oh God. Hopefully none of my exes are hearing this, because trust me, just like this book, the stories are going to be in there. So that's what I'm working on next.
That's awesome. I know when you were talking about the book, and Mika, I'll get to your question in a minute. Eva also had a book that was birthed during the pandemic, but she'll be here in October, hint,
Yes.
hint, to talk about it. So,
Congratulations. Yes. Come through with the pandemic goals. Yes.
all right,
Yes.
Mika.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So to kind of go back to something Hope said about and what Choice said, my sister, um, about back in the day how they did things. So when Choice found out about her dad, I was probably in elementary, and when I found out she had a different dad, like I don't know, it didn't bother me either. You know, after finding that, hey, it's another guy or whatever. But after I had my son and was involved, had him involved in activities and stuff like that, my mother didn't support us as far as attending our activities, but she allowed us to do a lot of things that most parents didn't allow their kids to do. So after having my son and being involved in his activities, I just learned that my mother was an imperfect mother, but she was the best mother,
Mm-hmm.
and I know Choice was hurt, a lot of times about different things. And I just hope that at some point she realized that she had to be the test dummy for the rest of her sisters, because there were things that my mother probably didn't allow Choice to do that she allowed us to do. But Choice may not know, because my mother has said it several times, that she realized that trying to punish a child didn't do any good, because they're going to do it anyway. So it's a lot of things she may have did or tried with Choice that didn't work. So she did it different with the younger girls, you know. But, like Choice said, she have your back for any and everything. Very, very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Great role model. And she raised us the best way she knew how. And yes,
Absolutely.
she's a sibling of 10. And when I say those 10 siblings can hold a secret, that we found some, we run across relatives, that's come out of the woodworks, but that's how they supported each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, you have to, it's all about era. Like my grandmother on my dad's side, her family, they are so close to where we've tried to get, before my grandmother passed away, we tried to get her to give us information. That woman took it to her grave, you know. But yeah, I have no complaints when it comes to my mother. Um, I was fortunate. I feel like me and all my sisters were fortunate to, to grow up with the type of childhood that we did. You know, my mother kept us involved in a lot of stuff. Like I said, she really didn't limit us on what we did. It wasn't, like my mom's, she was into being she's a Jehovah's Witness basically. So that's what we were, brought up in.
Mhm.
None of us was baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, but a lot of the Jehovah's Witness, the kids we grew up with, they weren't allowed to be involved in school activities. They weren't allowed to go to parties. None of that. My mother didn't limit us on stuff like that because she felt like we needed we needed that exposure.
Mhm.
And there were times where my mother was judged for the way she raised us. There was these There's one group of girls, these sisters. Everybody thought they were the perfect, girls, and this, that, and the other. Their mom was perfect. She had them in, at the meetings at the Kingdom Hall every Wednesday, Sunday, whatever the case. Everybody was judgmental of my mother. Well, guess who girls ended up with, pregnant in high school or doing drugs or in the club or, and guess who girls didn't? So, it's just, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Now
yeah.
this is good.
It sure is. It's like, man, we need to. This is why I do what I do, and this is why I wanted this book to. This is why I wrote the book, because there's so many factors of
Mhm.
forgiveness, right? And you learn, especially within Black women, we're so strong and we are the glue to family. But we also understand, like, Demetria, is that how you pronounce your name? How she mentioned, her mom wasn't the perfect mother. And there are no perfect people. There are no perfect mothers. There are no perfect fathers. There are no perfect families. But what's so important about this book is how do we reconcile with the imperfections, right? And the imperfections that has um trickle down, and we continue to perpetuate, right? Because we don't want to continue the same mistakes that our parents have made. We don't want to impress upon those mistakes that our parents have made to us onto us to our children, right? At some point we want to present better. And so that's why this book is so important, because you start to realize how there's so many different factors to this thing. We've talked about family secrets. We didn't just talk about um a toxic relationship with our mother, because we understand that those relationships they stem from so many other things, right? Not just their relationships with their moms, but the families that they were raised in, the times in which they was raised, the amount of siblings they had, all of those things. Like, it's a part of who they are. And even today, those things, just like it's a part of who our parents are, those same factors are a part of who I am. And they're the same factors are going to be a part of who my children are, right? And so we all have to figure out how each of those pieces play a part into how we connect with other people, how we choose to forgive, right? That is all a part of this, what Cam talked about earlier, just the mental health of it all, right? All of these factors. We could go on and on and on about family secrets, identity issues, so many different things. It's amazing when you allow for the space for people to just share and just be vulnerable, and without judgment, and talk about the things that they just want to let go of. So much is going to come up. So much is
Mhm.
going to come up. This is why I'm so grateful that you created this platform, and we need so many more like that, because without this, each one of us that's on this call tonight or today or wherever you are, like, we probably would have continued on with our lives, just holding on to the things that we've talked about today. And that's how we live our lives. Like, Black women, we live our lives, we just hold on to stuff. We just go through life and we manage it, and we don't have the space to just be and just share and just feel comfortable right? And this is what this is about. So I'm so happy that I'm so grateful that you created this space. But that is why I chose to talk about this book, because it's just so many parts to it. So many
Hmm.
parts.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Last minute questions, comments? All right. Well, Hope, thank you so much for coming under the scope
Yes.
with this fabulous book, everyone. How do we forgive our mothers? If I mean, gosh, she shared so much, and it's so much information in here as well, and the workbook too.
Hmm.
Okay, so you can either get the book or the workbook, but I say get both, right? I mean, you wear a shirt, you wear pants. Why not make it a whole
Exactly.
outfit?
There you
The
go.
book and
Yes.
the
I like
workbook.
that.
But I just want to thank you again, Hope, for coming, and you're welcome to come back at any time. So before we let everyone off the call, again, can you give us your websites and where we can find you?
Yes, you guys, if you want to reach out to me, please go to my website. It's www.justmorehope. That's JustMoreHope.com. It's the same for all of my social media. Just More Hope on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm really probably most active on Facebook and on Instagram. And like I said, my website, you can connect with me there because you can just shoot me an email. I would love, love, love to continue the conversation with anyone who is open to continuing this conversation. But also just connect with me on social media. I would love to continue to connect with you guys because again, this topic is so important. So yeah, head over to my website, justmorehope.com.
Awesome. Anyone else? Well, this has been great. We went
Yes, yes,
over,
yes,
but
yes,
that's
yes.
okay. Because when it's good, and I told everybody on Facebook, we were going to have popping hot tea today. This was some good tea, and I hope everybody sip, 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 had their
Yep.
pinkies up, because this tea was good, Hope.
Yes. Thank you. Thank every all the ladies for sharing their stories. It's very powerful in sharing. And thank you guys for choosing to be vulnerable and talk about your journeys. I appreciate you, and I'm so thankful for you guys.
Oh,
Thank you.
right. So we'll be here.
Thank you.
Under the Scope will be here next week. Next Saturday, we'll be talking about self-sabotage.
Uh-oh.
Oh boy. So Hope,
Yes.
if you're up, come back and see Hope if you're up.
Okay.
And I
Yes.
want to thank everybody for coming as usual. I'm Kimberlyn B. This is Under the Scope, where good tea and good reads are welcome. Everybody
Yes.
have a great day. Thank you
Thank
Bye.
again,
you. Thank
everyone.
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have
Bye.
a
Bye
good
bye.
Bye
day.
bye.